Hello, everybody. My name is Happy, and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today, we're returning to the Napoleonic Wars for the Battle of Germany 1813 by Epic History. As always, I will include an original link in the description down below. Please head over to Epic History if you enjoy what you see here, and like, subscribe, whatever you need to do to show your support for the hard work that they put into this series. All right, with that said, I'm going to do a quick disclaimer. I just recently got back from some hiking, and my allergies are acting up a bit, so I might be a little sniffly. I might have to pause periodically to deal with a sneezing fit, so just be aware. If there's any weirdness in the video, that's probably why, or so on and so forth. With that said, we left off with the retreat from Moscow. Napoleon has lost a significant portion of his Grande Armée, and while he has reached safe territory, that safe territory, at least for the moment, is territory that he had previously conquered, or at least his armies have reached safe territory, along with Napoleon himself. Let me be clear there. These areas are already looking at what has happened in Russia and reconsidering their own position in everything that's going on around here. There is growing talk of another coalition forming. Russia is trying to decide what they're going to do to follow up this failed invasion. It's interesting times, so let's just let Epic History walk us through it. What a career Napoleon has ruined. Having gained so much glory, he could bestow peace on Europe, but he has not done so. The spell is broken. Emperor Alexander of Russia, Vilna, December 1812.
1812 had been a disastrous year for Napoleon. His invasion of Russia had led to the almost total destruction of an army of 500,000 men.
Crazy.
Now Poland and Germany were wide open to Russian attack. Some advised Emperor Alexander that this was the time to make a favourable peace with Napoleon. Russia's own armies had been mauled, and Western Russia devastated.
Yeah, it's important to remember this. It's easy to forget this because we're so fixated on Napoleon's disastrous retreat that, yeah, Western Russia had been devastated by these armies passing through, sometimes at their own hand in order to deny material to Napoleon and shelter and things like that. So they have to consider, are we strong enough? Are we in a position where we can follow Napoleon out and go off the defensive, which we were on, and go on the attack? Or do we just treat with Napoleon, see if maybe he will give us better terms than he had given in the previous treaties, release Oldenburg, address our concerns about this new Duchy of Warsaw that's right on our doorstep, things like that. So they've got a lot of considering to do too.
But Alexander was determined to see Napoleon defeated for good, to free Europe from his clutches, and avenge Moscow's destruction by taking Paris. Napoleon's allies were deserting him.
Yep.
Prussian troops had already agreed a truce with the Russians.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is what he's specifically talking about here, but there was an incident during the latter stages of the retreat where the rear guard of the Prussian army, under a commander known as, I believe it was York, actually, more or less defected. What they did was they actually signed an independent treaty of neutrality with Russia, saying, let's not fight each other. Now, the King of Prussia was not happy about this initially. He saw them as traitors. However, little later they kind of come around and like maybe we should be doing the same. Some people cite York's decision to enter a separate treaty with Russia as kind of a triggering event that will make what was it, King Frederick of Prussia reconsider his position. Like I said, initially he was angered by it. He sees it as a commander, and not even just a major commander, but a sub commander of a different unit, independently signing a treaty of neutrality with Russia. But that's just an initial reaction to that. You know, somebody in your group failed to obey orders. Worse, he's the rear guard. That's the worst one to have betray your orders. He signed a treaty with the enemy, but you know, maybe that is the right thing to do. Once he calms down a bit, he starts considering it. So that's one of these dominoes that's going to start falling. Like I said, I don't know if that's the specific event he's talking about, but it would be happening right at this time, so it probably is. And I don't know if they're gonna come circle back to this, so I'm not gonna say any more. We'll just let him continue.
Schwarzenberg's corps marched back to Austria, which assumed a policy of watchful neutrality. Napoleon had left Marshal Murat in charge of the remnants of the army, but he left for the Kingdom of Naples, hoping to cut a deal with the Allies that would let him keep his throne.
Now, well, let's let him continue because I was going to say that's going to lead to some issues, but see what he's going to say first.
He was replaced by Napoleon's stepson, Eugene, who'd proved himself a brave and able soldier in Russia, but was unused to independent command.
Right, and the way they just presented this as Murat just heading back to Naples and Eugene taking over, they present it as just a simple thing that happened, the transition of power or authority over these forces. It was messier than that. It was fairly messy, which is going to put Eugene in a weaker position to start out, which is going to be a problem combined with his relative inexperience. This isn't something he's done before. So, a lot more nuance than what they just said there. But they can't cover everything, right? We'd have a 3-day video instead of a 30-minute video.
And now faced odds of 4-1.
Ay, ay, ay.
As Russian forces advanced through Poland, he continued to retreat west, leaving garrisons to hold strategic fortresses, most of which were soon besieged. On the 7th of February, Russian troops entered Warsaw unopposed. Napoleon's Polish client state, the Duchy of Warsaw, effectively ceased to exist.
And that's not surprising that Alexander and his Russians would immediately go for Warsaw. That was a huge problem for them. In their mind, and we talked about this a little bit last video, and we talked about this a little bit in a comment from the last video. The Duchy of Warsaw was a big reason that Russia was really unhappy with their treaty with Napoleon. It's not what set them off ultimately. It was the Napoleon taking over Oldenburg that was the real straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. Because he had agreed not to do that, very specifically agreed not to do that. But the Russians had, even at that point, they were already trying to figure out what they were going to do about Warsaw. Because Napoleon in the treaty had created the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia was afraid that they would give the Duchy of Warsaw its independence. That was what they were worried about, because they have a long history of conflict with Poland. And they really do not want a independent Poland re-arising. It's a threat. It's a threat on their border. So yeah, it's not surprising that that's going to be the thing they really go after first.
3 weeks later, Russian troops entered Berlin, while Sweden joined the Allies.
Yep.
Sweden was ruled by Napoleon's former Marshal Bernadotte, now officially known as Crown Prince Karl Johann. Many would accuse him of betraying Napoleon, but he'd always been clear that once he became Sweden's Crown Prince, he'd pursue Swedish interests, which is what he now claimed to do. In exchange for Norway, to be taken from France's ally Denmark, and £1 million from Britain, Bernadotte agreed to join what was now the 6th coalition against France since the Revolution, with an army of 30,000 troops. 10 days later, King Frederick William of Prussia declared war on France.
It was Frederick, okay.
It followed weeks of indecision. The king was widely seen as a weak character and terrified of Napoleon. But with guarantees of Russian military support, the return of lost territory, and enormous financial and material aid from Britain, he agreed to field an army of 80,000 men.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, because it doesn't look like they're going to talk about it, York's decision to treat independently with the Russians was one of the factors that helped sway Frederick, even though he was very upset when it actually happened. But once he calmed down and thought it over, he was like, this could be the best thing to do. Join the Russians.
On the 17th of March, he issued a proclamation to the people of Prussia and Germany, "An mein Volk," to my people,
Right.
summoning them to fight for Prussia and Germany's honor, in what would soon be known as the German War of Liberation.
This is the final decisive struggle, an honorable peace or a heroic end.
The Prussian army had been greatly reformed since its humiliating defeat to Napoleon in 1806. A military commission headed by General von Scharnhorst had sacked nearly 200 old generals and abolished flogging, expanded recruitment and introduced exams for officers, and overhauled training, tactics and drill. When Napoleon met the new Prussian army in battle 2 months later, he remarked, "These animals have learned something."
Yeah, and that is a big effect of the Napoleonic Wars. We're going to see so many changes in military tactics over the course of this war, and starting with Napoleon himself, but as he's developing these new tactics like his core system, so on and so forth, his enemies are having to devise new tactics to react to him, or rediscover old ones like the Fabian strategy. We just see so many changes happening here. We see countries stepping up their game, training their army better, coming up with new tactics and new styles of warfare to deal with a threat like Napoleon. And the world's never going to be the same after this.
Small consolation, they'd learned most of it from him.
Yeah. Only a short time ago, I was the conqueror of the world, commanding the largest and finest army in modern times. That's all gone now. Napoleon to Count Molé, Tuileries Palace, February of 1813. And I know I butchered my French pronunciations, I always do. My apologies to the French people. Like I said, I took one semester of France. With lifelong hearing loss, I just cannot hear the French sounds. And I'm always nervous that when I hear a word that I'm missing a sound that's actually there that may not actually be, that get the idea. of all the languages that I tried to tackle, French had been by far and away the hardest for me.
As his enemies massed in Germany, Napoleon was in Paris, working tirelessly to build a new army with which to face them. 137,000 new conscripts joined the army, and laws passed to call up 100,000 more, while 40,000 veterans from the army in Spain, 16,000 Marines, and 80,000 men of the National Guard, a home defence force, were transferred to Germany. The new conscripts were nicknamed Marie-Louises, after Napoleon's young wife, who passed the new conscription laws in his absence.
Yeah, and that name stuck for quite a while. Some historians and some writers use it to refer to this initial wave that was created right after she passed that edict, the Conscription Act, to get these Marie-Louises, but others will use that term throughout the remainder of the Napoleonic era for young, inexperienced French conscripts and soldiers. You've got to realize he's lost a significant portion of his experienced soldiers, but even more than that, he's lost a lot of his experienced officers, both full officers and the non-commissioned officers. This is going to leave him in trouble. Also, he's lost a significant portion of his horses, which is going to severely restrict his maneuverability, not only just the cavalry, but also being able to maneuver supplies or artillery, things like that. So he's hurting.
They were young and raw. 2/3 were teenagers, and there was a severe lack of experienced officers and NCOs. In short, the countless irreplaceable veterans now lying beneath Russian soil. There was also a critical shortage of cavalry, a crisis mocked by British satirists.
Strut, look big, and make your hobbies prance. We'll make them believe there's a cavalry in France. Okay, I see. Fake horses. Actually, I could believe they would do that. Apparently, they didn't study British history and learned that coconuts work just fine. What do you think of my ruse de guerre? They will make the Cossacks run. Somehow, I don't think so. They might make the Cossacks die laughing. I mean, that might actually work in that sense. Love political cartoons like this, but yeah, they were really hurting for the horses. And like I said, it's not just about the cavalry; it's also about supply trains and artillery. You lose a lot of your mobility and your ability to get things where you need them. And while I'm thinking about it, as Napoleon's coming back out into Western Europe, he's leaving Russia. He got to deal with crises all over the place, including there had been a coup attempt while he was in Russia. I can't remember the name of the guy who did it. I should be able to, but I can't. He had actually forged papers that said that Napoleon had died in Russia and tried to use those to take control of the French army in Paris in order to stage a coup. Unfortunately, one of the officers recognized that the documents were forged, and he ended up being arrested. But news of that got to be really troubling Napoleon as well. He's losing his grip. He's got to know he's losing his grip, and it's getting increasingly dangerous for him.
It would take Napoleon longer to replace the many thousands of horses and trained horsemen who'd perished in Russia.
And trained horses.
When Napoleon left Paris for Germany in mid-April, the French situation was precarious. Eugene had been forced back behind the river Elbe to the fortified city of Magdeburg. Dresden, the capital of Saxony, had fallen to the Prussians. The Duchy of Mecklenburg-Schwerin became the first German state to defect from Napoleon's Confederation of the Rhine. Russian Cossacks raided as far as Hamburg, inspiring local revolts against French occupying forces. Meanwhile, Austria stood on the sidelines, so far declining to back either side. Napoleon's miraculous feat of organization meant he now had more than 200,000 troops in Germany. And the Emperor's personal magnetism was undimmed. The morale of his army was high. The Russians, on the other hand, lost their iconic commander, Field Marshal Kutuzov, to pneumonia on the 28th of April. His role was taken over by General Wittgenstein. Russian troops were exhausted and far from home, their army weakened by the need to contain French garrisons across Poland and Germany. Prussia and Sweden had yet to fully mobilize their strength, and Allied forces barely mustered 100,000 men. They were now heavily outnumbered by Napoleon, and the French Emperor decided to strike quickly. He ordered Marshal Davout to Hamburg with 35,000 men to secure his northern flank. He would march against the Russian and Prussian forces converging on Leipzig to force a decisive battle. Victory would make Austria think twice about joining the Allies, allow him to rescue the 90,000 men trapped in garrisons across Germany and Poland, and re-establish his dominance over Europe.
If the art of war was only the art of not taking risks, glory would belong to mediocrities. We need a full triumph. Napoleon to his marshals, June 1813. Fortune favors the bold.
As Napoleon advanced on Leipzig, the Allies faced a predicament. To risk battle against Napoleon's larger army, or give up Germany without a fight, a potentially devastating blow to Allied morale and any chance of winning Austria over to their cause. Allied headquarters made the bold decision to attack. They knew most of Napoleon's army was made up of raw conscripts, that their own troops were better trained and had a great superiority in cavalry and artillery. The Allies agreed that as Napoleon crossed the Saale River, they would hit his right flank before he could concentrate the full mass of his forces. The two armies were on a collision course, but Napoleon's shortage of cavalry meant he lacked information about Allied movements.
Yep, that's another disadvantage of losing your cavalry is, like I said, is mobility, and that includes scouting. People to ride out ahead of the armies, locate the enemies, get counts, get things like that.
On the 1st of May, Marshal Bessières, commanding the cavalry in Murat's absence, was carrying out reconnaissance himself when he was hit by a cannonball and killed instantly. Bessières was the second of Napoleon's marshals to be killed in action, and like Lannes, an old comrade and trusted friend. The Allies were able to surprise Napoleon, falling on Marshal Ney's Third Corps near Lützen. Ney's troops had to cling on in the face of a Russian and Prussian onslaught, while Napoleon rapidly redirected his other corps to fall on the enemy's flanks. At one stage, Napoleon had to personally help rally routing troops as they broke in the face of determined Prussian assaults. But on the whole, his young conscripts fought with courage. And despite hours of savage fighting, Wittgenstein could not exploit his early advantage. As French reinforcements arrived, the battle turned against him. Towards dusk, the Allies were forced to break off the engagement. though they'd inflicted around 22,000 casualties, losing just half as many men. General von Scharnhorst, mortally wounded, was among them.
That's actually pretty impressive against Napoleon, given that Napoleon had the superior numbers. Granted, green troops, but still.
Crucially, Napoleon's lack of cavalry meant he was unable to pursue the enemy, who retreated in good order. Expecting the Prussians to fall back on Berlin, Napoleon sent Marshal Ney in pursuit, while he continued east. But the Allied army stayed together, withdrawing to a defensive position at Bautzen, deliberately close to the Austrian border, hoping to entice Schwarzenberg to intervene, and daring Napoleon to violate Austrian neutrality. Neither happened. Instead,
It was a good idea, though.
Napoleon ordered Ney to swing south to fall on the Allies' northern flank, while he launched a frontal assault to pin them in place. The battle lasted 2 days, as French infantry struggled forward against the Prussian and Russian lines. But a misunderstanding over Ney's orders caused a delay that allowed the Allies to narrowly escape Napoleon's trap. Once more, the Allies fought with great determination and inflicted many more losses than they suffered. There were more casualties during the pursuit, including the next day General Duroc, Grand Marshal of the Palace, responsible for Napoleon's personal arrangements, and his closest surviving friend. Riding with Napoleon's staff, a freak cannon shot ricocheted off a tree and disemboweled him. His slow, painful death deeply upset Napoleon. The Emperor continued his pursuit to Breslau, once again hindered by his lack of experienced cavalry, while Oudinot was sent north to take Berlin, but was held at Luckau by von Bülow's Prussian corps. On the 2nd of June, with both sides strained to breaking point, neutral Austria proposed a ceasefire, which, to the surprise of many, Napoleon accepted.
My eagles are again victorious, but my star is setting. Napoleon to General Caulaincourt. Saxony, 2nd of May, 1813. That's an optimistic way to look at it. His victories so far have been pretty Pyrrhic, where he's losing twice as many men as he's killing, and he hasn't really resolved anything. So I don't know if I'd call them victories, but they kind of have to if you want to keep the morale up, I guess.
The Armistice of Plaswitz would last more than 2 months, a period of intense diplomacy and military mobilization by both sides. Napoleon wanted time to rebuild his cavalry, a shortage of which had allowed the Allies to escape twice. But he also wanted to keep Austria on side, which he feared might join the Allies with 200,000 troops, even though Emperor Francis I was now his father-in-law, since Napoleon's marriage to his daughter Marie-Louise in 1810. Austrian Foreign Minister Clemens von Metternich, who'd become one of 19th century Europe's most influential statesmen, now took centre stage. Metternich wanted peace and to see Austria restored as a great European power, which meant Napoleon contained, but not crushed, which would hand too much power to Russia. In June, he travelled to Dresden to ask Napoleon to make concessions, while promising the Allies that if he did not, Austria would join them. But Napoleon dismissed Metternich's terms out of hand. He would not return the Illyrian provinces to Austria, agree to the repartition of Poland, or the breakup of the Confederation of the Rhine. All were out of the question. Napoleon famously threw his hat to the ground in fury. "Peace and war lie in your Majesty's hands," Metternich is said to have warned him. "Today you can still make peace. Tomorrow it may be too late." But Napoleon preferred war to what he called a humiliating peace.
Expect a defeat whenever the Emperor attacks in person. Attack and defeat his lieutenants whenever you can. General Moreau to Emperor Alexander, Silesia, July of 1813. Good advice.
On the 12th of August 1813, Austria joined the Sixth Coalition and declared war on France. The Allies now had a numerical advantage of 3-2, and a new strategy, the Trachenberg plan.
Yep.
Recognizing Napoleon's genius, the Allies would avoid battle with the Emperor and instead target his marshals, threaten his flanks, and wear down French forces, until it was time to close in for the kill. Over the next few months, the coalition would also receive massive material support from Britain, including £8 million in silver and gold coin, 200 cannon with transport, 120,000 firearms, 18 million rounds of ammunition, 23,000 barrels of gunpowder, 30,000 swords and sabres, 150,000 uniforms, 175,000 pairs of boots, 1.5 million pounds of beef, biscuit and flour, and 28,000 gallons of rum and brandy.
The most important.
The total value of British aid to the coalition in 1813 was £11.3 million. Today, worth around $500 million.
Jeez.
Napoleon, meanwhile, had turned Dresden into a major supply depot and strengthened his cavalry arm, though it remained a pale shadow of its glorious past. Murat returned to lead it, his secret approach to the Allies having been rebuffed. But when news arrived of King Joseph's disastrous defeat to Wellington's Anglo-Spanish-Portuguese army at the Battle of Vittoria, Napoleon had to send Marshal Soult, one of his best commanders, to salvage the situation. On the 15th of August, Napoleon left Dresden and advanced against what he considered the most urgent threat, the joint Prussian-Russian army of Silesia, commanded by General Gebhard von Blücher, soon to win the nickname Marshal Vorwärts, Marshal Forwards, for his aggressive leadership. But Blücher followed the new plan and retreated when he learned of Napoleon's advance. Napoleon then received news from Marshal Saint-Cyr, holding Dresden with 20,000 men, that Schwarzenberg's gigantic army of Bohemia was approaching, and the city and its supplies were in danger. Napoleon left Marshal MacDonald to keep an eye on Blücher, and raced back to Dresden, sending Van Damme's First Corps to threaten Schwarzenberg's communications. By the time the Allied assault began, enough reinforcements had arrived to fight off the attack. The next day, despite being heavily outnumbered, Napoleon ordered a counterattack. Struggling through mud and heavy rain, Marshal Murat's advance, supported by Victor's Second Corps, broke the Allied left flank and took 13,000 prisoners. The Allies had suffered a disastrous defeat because they'd ignored their own rule.
Yep.
Don't take on Napoleon in battle. But news soon arrived that turned the situation on its head. Marshal Oudinot had resumed his advance on Berlin with 66,000 men. But in 3 days of heavy combat around Grossbeeren, he was defeated by Bernadotte's Army of the North. Some of the most savage fighting was between Napoleon's Saxon allies and von Bülow's Prussians, two German states that for now remained on opposing sides.
Yeah, and during this entire thing, you're going to have Germanic people on both sides. It's not a clean division. You're going to have some Germanic peoples, even from the same countries, fighting on the side of the coalition, others fighting on the side of Napoleon. That is pretty common in circumstances like this.
3 days later,
in fact, I've even heard some historians describe this period as, for all intents and purposes, a German civil war.
The Katzbach River, Blücher inflicted a crushing defeat on Marshal MacDonald, driving some French troops into the river itself. MacDonald lost 30,000 men, 3 eagles and 100 guns, for Blücher's 22,000 casualties. 3 days after Napoleon's victory at Dresden, as Van Damme's corps pursued the Allies, it became trapped in wooded valleys around Kulm and was overrun. General Van Damme himself was dragged from his horse by Cossacks, as he and 10,000 of his men were made prisoner. Napoleon sent Ney to take over from Oudinot, who engaged Bülow's Prussian corps at Dennewitz. The Prussians, fighting to save Berlin, held their own until Russian and Swedish reinforcements arrived to turn the battle decisively in the Allies' favour. Ney's retreat became a rout, with the loss of another 22,000 men. Napoleon's brilliant victory at Dresden had been completely overturned in just 10 days. The Allied plan was working. Napoleon became increasingly frustrated as Allied armies withdrew wherever he advanced, and advanced wherever he was not. His teenage conscripts were exhausted by constant marching, and famished as Saxony had been stripped bare of supplies. Thousands fell sick, thousands more deserted. Russian and Prussian light troops were now operating behind Napoleon's army, harassing his communications with France. Many of Napoleon's marshals advised him to pull back to the River Rhine. But Napoleon wasn't giving up Germany without a fight.
There will inevitably be a great battle at Leipzig. Napoleon to Marshal Ney, 13th of October, 1813.
By October 1813, Napoleon faced 250,000 Allied troops in Germany, converging on him from 3 directions. 900 miles away, Field Marshal Wellington was crossing the Bidassoa River into France, the first enemy army on French soil in nearly 20 years. While the Kingdom of Bavaria, a French ally since the days of Austerlitz, had secretly agreed to switch sides and would declare war on France on the 14th of October. Napoleon planned to defend the line of the River Elbe. But the arrival of General Bennigsen's reserve Russian army freed up Blücher, who suddenly marched to join forces with Bernadotte and forced his way across the Elbe at Wartenberg. Napoleon went north with 150,000 men, seeking the decisive battle that would change his fortunes. But once more, Blücher narrowly escaped him. Then came news.
That has to be so frustrating. No matter where you go, they're going to run away from you and attack your men somewhere else. That's just got to be so frustrating for Napoleon. I mean, it's frustrating for me just thinking about it.
News from Murat, who'd been left with 67,000 men to cover Schwarzenberg. The enemy had bypassed Dresden and was heading for Leipzig. If the city fell, Napoleon would be cut off from France. Once more, he was advised to fall back to the Rhine. But instead, Napoleon ordered all his forces to concentrate at Leipzig. He would risk everything in one great battle to decide the fate of his empire and the fate of Europe.
And of course,
Thank
they
you
stopped
to
there.
all our patrons.
All right, that was a good one. Didn't contribute as much as I would like, but that's pretty typical when we have a military heavy focused video, because military history is one of my weakest areas. But I learned a lot, and I hope I was able to contribute at least a little bit. So much going on at this time, and clearly they're oversimplifying a lot of this, because there is so much going on. So many countries are negotiating almost constantly behind Napoleon's back. And Napoleon himself is constantly looking for solutions to his growing list of problems. The peninsula is, for all intents and purposes, lost to him. The British are in France. That can't be good for him. He's just had a coup attempt. He's got more and more people allying against him, and for the first time, they're refusing to fight him directly. And that's a problem. That's a big problem for him, because he's good at what he does. He absolutely is, and now they know that, they're not going to fight him. Yeah, he's in big trouble. I think a good alternate history question would be, what would have happened if he had listened to his advisors, retreated to the Rhine earlier, kind of shored up his defenses back in territory that he knew was reasonably friendly and well held, rather than trying to hold on to the territory that he was obviously losing his grip on. Yes, that would have cost him a significant portion of his empire, but question being, would that have allowed him to survive? Would the Allies have been willing to fight him back closer to France, or would they have said, this is enough, let's pull back and try some diplomatic agreements at that point? So that's something we might look at in the future. There's got to be alternate histories about that decision somewhere, so maybe we'll look into that someday. Anyway, I think we're done here. We'll be back for tomorrow for some more, and yeah, we'll see where it leads. So thank you for joining me. See y'all next time. Bye-bye.